Deep breath, guys. Welcome, guys, to Talkin Hawkins, our Stranger Things in review. My name is Kyle, your host. Welcome to Project Potter. If you haven't been here before, guys, what an episode! I mean, emotionally heavy, action-packed, production values out off the chain. I'm sitting here, wiping tears from my eyes. Crazy. So I'm gonna try and compose myself here, guys. We're here talking season 4, episode 4, Stranger Things. Thanks for checking out the channel, guys. Go check out the other content, of course, if you haven't been here before. But guys, season 4, I'd say, has been pretty good, but a little slow so far. Last episode, guys, I talked about how it was a bad episode, but like the end got me ready to go. Not only does Stranger Things bounce back, it bounces back in a big way with one of their best episodes I've ever seen. If you haven't been here before, I go through my favorite scenes, my favorite character, my least favorite character for every episode, score out of 10, and that's pretty much it. So, guys, this one is all about Max. We find out that we found out last episode that Max is cursed and that she's seeing the clock and the time is ticking, and we got to find out what Vecna's curse is or how to break Vecna's curse. And there's so many different things here, guys, for my favorite scenes. This episode just blew me away. And it was so, like I said, guys, emotionally heavy. There was not a wasted minute. This was a longer episode. This one was an hour and 20 minutes. Every minute was used to perfection here. We had Robin and Nancy, and I talked about how last episode, guys, Robin and Nancy disappointed me with their dynamic. Well, they go to the mental hospital to go see Victor, who is the only guy who survived the known attack from Vecna. So we have Fred and Chrissy, who both died from Vecna. And then there's this guy, Victor, who like years ago survived, and they research and they find out that Victor was the only one. And they're like, all right, we got to find out how he survived. So Nancy and Robin go to the hospital. The one knock I will say for this episode, there's two parts where there was the convenience factor that, to move the plot along kind of helped out. The one at the mental hospital where, they go in and there's a funny scene where Robin wearing, this attire and they're trying to be proper and like, oh yeah, our paper's due next week or whatever. And then the guy's like, nah, you can't see Victor. Like you have to go through a board and there's process and it could take weeks or months. And they're like, no, our paper's due next week. And they're like, well, whose fault is that? And I was like, that's good. But then Robin goes on this really, really impassioned speech and she's like, I just want to be like someone like you. And this is when the guy goes, well, all right, and then they said, I'll give you a little bit of time with Victor. And the scene is really well acted, but it was just like realistically, this guy would go, look, I'm sorry, but I can't let you talk to Victor. And then, that would be the end of it. But to move the plot along, of course, they go in there. And then, guys, we get this awesome Silence of the Lambs / Shutter Island crossover or like mix where it's like, they see all the patients outside and they talk about how music is a huge factor and music affects, it calms the broken mind. And that's obviously a big key at the end of the episode here. But it's so chilling and good. And we get this tragic story of Victor who, amazing effects where he ends up gouging his own eyes out with a razor because he was so depressed from his story that he tells from his family being murdered that he tried to join them. And it's so sad and so heavy and just so well acted, and it's creepy and it's well shot and everything is just so good. And that was like a heartbreaking tale to hear Victor recount. Like he's like, we went to this house and he's like, we had a month of peace and then we had dead animals that started showing up. And he's like, this was evil. It was pure evil. It wasn't a wildcat. And has these visions. And he talks about how his wife has his visions first where she's got like the spiders come out of the tub and he goes over and there's just the water running. And he's like, it took the wife first and we get that horrendous scene, horrendous in a good way, of like heartbreaking scene where his wife goes up and Vecna gets her first and her arms are snapped and stuff like we've seen, and she dies right in front of her kids and her kids are screaming. He's like, oh my god. And he's like, it took the kids next, and it's like, oh my god, it's so heartbreaking. And that whole scene was so incredible, and I was like on the edge of my seat, and it was scary and it was great. And that's all great. The whole Max thing, dude, where she's writing letters because she understands that this could be her last day. This is leading up to like, they're driving the car and Max is like sitting there and it's Max and Lucas and Dustin and Steve. But Max is like dropping off letters and she goes to her mom's place and she has this, vision where her mom is there and she says, there's some letters inside. She's like, if something happens to me, and she's like, you're scaring me, hon. And she's like, in case something's not okay. And then it turns out that that's like Vecna. So she like in reality went there and her mom was at work because in like her illusion, she said like, oh yeah, I got out of, why aren't you at work? And she's like, I got out early. so I'm just doing some chores, and it's just really cool because Vecna like plays with those illusions, and that's the whole thing, as Victor said, where he other people aren't seeing what she's seeing. So that's why to the group, they're sitting there and Max is just, sitting there. She's reading the note to Billy. And at the end, they go up and, they're not seeing that she's obviously Vecna's in this world and stuff. But just this whole idea that Max knows that there's a good chance that she dies if they don't figure it out. And, they didn't really have any leads or anything. They didn't know what was going on. She's up against the clock quite literally. And so she knows that, like, if I die, I want to make sure that everyone I care about knows how I feel about them. And so when she's giving out the letters, they're like, what is this? And she's like, in case things, don't go well, like for me, like I want to know. And just the burden of like knowing that you can tell the acting by Max was so phenomenal, where like she's like in the car, and she's like got her head back and you can tell she's like thinking about everything. And just if you knew that you were cursed, and she's like, she has a great line where she's like, I knew that asshole cursed me. I should have seen that one coming. If you knew that there was a high probability that this was your last day, like she says, I don't want to spend my last day on Earth in the Mike Wheeler's basement, like the armpit basement or whatever she says. She's just out of it and she's heavy and she's emotional, but she's like, I want to make sure that I get everything out that I can get out if things go wrong. And that it just really like weighed on me. And I'm like, man, I can't imagine. And her friends, it's like, the whole group's acting is so good because she's sitting there, right? But then like they're all worried, right? But they can't do anything about it. And they're trying to figure it out, but they're so like they're sitting there with Max, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I'm okay. And there's that great scene where Lucas is like, talk to me, I'm right here. And she's like, I don't, I don't want to talk or whatever. And he's like, but I don't want a letter. I want you to talk to me. And it's just, that whole sequence, guys, is just amazing. And probably my one small thing I didn't really like was Hopper's whole thing. When he escapes, he says like, oh, 1 in 100 to 1 chances. And you're like, Hopper's going to get out, obviously. But I'm thinking about it. I'm like, all right, your ankle's smashed, right? And so I'm thinking about, but then he has to like pretend that his chain is not broken. So they like do the check, everything. And I don't know if he like wrapped it around or if he just kept it on his broken ankle or what, but he is able to like get through security every time. And then eventually he makes his move where he goes to the tool shed. I'm like, all right. And then he's like kind of undercover, but then the guy sends the gunshots off and then everything kind of blows up, literally blows up when he has there's like dynamite in the tool shed. And I'm like wondering why there's dynamite in there, but do they need it for the tracks? I don't know, but he sets the dynamite off and then it's like a whole thing. But the one thing I didn't like, even though Hopper's escape was kind of a lot of things had to go right and it's a fun scene, but when he goes to the top of the tool shed and then jumps over and then like he got the keys to the snowmobile that I guess the guard just had, or maybe they're in the tool shed, but he like runs to the snowmobile and I'm like, bro, your ankle is destroyed. Like you should not be able to put any weight on that and you should be in excruciating pain. And he gets on there and then obviously they're like firing up the hill and it's like a straight shot, but he just kind of gets away. Of course the bullets miss. And I was like, all right, it's a fun scene, but like that took me out of it a little bit because I was like, the odds of this like going, I mean, 100 to 1 odds, like he says, but I don't know. But then he's like running into town after and he's just running and it's fine. And I'm like, dude, how are you running and putting any weight on that? So that one I was like, okay. But then we get the big Yuri twist, which I thought was great because I did not see that coming and it was really well done. And he's like, oh, Yuri seemed like a nice guy and you figure something would go on. But the fact that he's just like, oh, guess what? I'm not going to do that deal. Actually, I'm going to keep this 40,000 and also, it's worth more valuable is an escaped prisoner and also corrupted guards. So he sells them out and he's like, oh, and Americans wanted by the KGB. And so suddenly he's like, Yuri's like seeing dollar signs, dude. Like it's crazy. So I'm like, oh, Yuri, come on, man. Like, yeah, you had to do him like that. So that was a good twist I did not see coming, but just everything going on, guys. Like I said, I don't want to say character dynamics every time, but everything just worked for me so well in this episode. And like I said, it was a longer episode and I know Stranger Things has been like, we're going to put longer and longer episodes. I know episode 9, when we get there, is like 2.5 hours, but I love the world and I love the characters so much that I'm like, I'm good with this. Oh my God, guys, I almost completely forgot about this. The pizza scene. This is how great this episode was, is that I completely almost forgot about this whole amazing sequence, this one shot sequence where the boys are in the house and, their guards are like watching golf and they're like, oh my God, they're not even doing anything. They're just watching TV. but they like have the pizza thing, and he's like, okay, we're gonna get a ride away, but we don't have any money. And he's like, it's okay. Argyle works at Pizza Surfer Pizza Boy, whatever it's called. And so he's like, hey, we're hungry. And the guy's like, I could eat. And I'm like, okay, this makes sense, because you would be sitting there being like, okay, we should get some pizza. Although you think that the security guys or whatever would have like a guy to get them food, like a trusted source, but it's okay. That's one of those things I can overlook. But they call Argyle, and he's like, Argyle, I will say, my least favorite character in the series, but I will say he's fighting the war that nobody else wants to fight, and that's the war on pineapple. And he's sticking up for pineapple on pizza, and that's someone I can get behind, because pineapple on pizza is delicious. He's like, don't deny it until you try it, and I'm like, yes, dude. So pineapple on pizza, delicious. So anyone who says otherwise, I hope you go to I hope that not gets you. No, I'm just kidding. But the whole sequence, unreal, dude. I love one shot sequences. It reminds me of it's True Detective season one. Incredible show. There's a famous like one shot sequence where it doesn't cut at all, and that's what they did here a little bit, much shorter sequence, but it was incredible, dude. There's fire coming from different places, things are blowing up, and they're realistic dialogue where they're like, oh shit, shit, and he's like, follow me, and he's taking out guys, and he gets hit, and the kids are like, oh my god. And then when they get into Argyle's van, and he's like, why does that guy have a gun? And they're like, drive. He's like, oh my god. It's funny when he pulls up and he's like, oh, they're having a party without me, not cool, man. And then he quickly is like, oh my god, why is that guy carrying a gun? And that was one of the times I was like, okay, that was a funny line. So yeah, just from start to finish, guys. So I'm sure I'm missing things, but just so much great use of time in this episode, and just a lot of amazing things for just an incredible episode. Okay, guys, my Hawkins hero, which is my favorite character. This one was an easy one for me. This was Maxine. What made the ending so good for me is that I honestly was like, they could kill Max right here, and you're like, oh, they're probably not going to kill any of the main cast because they're so good. But they were setting up the whole episode where she's writing the letters, and she's like, in case things don't go well. And Maxine has accepted that she's going to die, right? She's like, it's okay. And Vecna talks about how she's hiding from her friends and stuff, and she has been, but she's like, she mentions how things have been going poorly since Billy died, and she misses Billy. And there's that, oh my god, that amazing scene where she's sitting there, guys, before Vecna puts her in the trance, where she's reading her letter to Billy. Shout out to Dacre Montgomery also, who shows up in the Upside Down or wherever we are there, and just awesome. Love Billy. But she's reading this heartfelt letter to her where she's like, I hated you, you hated me. Like, it probably wasn't going to work out. But she's like, sometimes I think about, like, what if I ran and got you or something? Or what if I saved you? And then she's like, I think we would have actually been good friends, like a brother and a sister. And she's like, we could have tried. And I was like, just like bawling my eyes out, dude. That was so emotional and sad. And the whole episode was just so good. And she's like one of the newer cast members when she came on. She wasn't part of the original crew, obviously, but what a casting choice that was. And she fits right in. And I was like, man, when they start playing Run Up That Hill, I was just like weeping, and I was like on the edge of my seat and had full chills, dude. And it was like a crazy scene. And not only is that song a banger, but like, and also, guys, remember that she was listening to that the first or second episode, I forget, when she's in the hall. So that was a good call back there. But she's in the trance, and it's so well done. I got chills. Just, I don't know if you guys can see that. You probably can't see that. But when she is sitting there, and they're like, oh my god, and Dustin's like scrambling, and they finally get back in touch with Robin after they like got in trouble, and then they have to make a run for it at the asylum or whatever, the mental hospital. Dustin's like, oh my god, thank God, please tell me that you like figured it out, because he's like, dude, we're about to lose Max. And when they're trying to wake her up and stuff, and they're freaking out, and they know what's going on, and there's like a shot that Dustin where he's like, oh my god, I felt that, it was really, really heavy. And then just the way it's so well done, where she's trying to fight it, but Vecna's like, they can't help you here, you belong in here, you're hiding from your friends. And then she like goes up, when she goes up, and they're like, oh my god, and like it keeps cutting back, and I was like, oh, it's crazy. And then for her to escape, she stabs Vecna, and then for her, she's running there, and I was like, oh dude, she's not going to make it. She's not going to make it. Or I was like, they're still going to kill her off even after that. And it would have been so tragic and sad, but like, so like, what a way to go out for Max. But just incredible. The actress was so good, and her best performance easily. And she's been really good. But when they played that montage of all the moments from like of her like having fun and being with her friends and stuff, and how the group has just accepted her, I was crying like a baby. It was so good, and again, just got chills just talking about it. So Maxine was easily, without a doubt, her best performance. My Hawkins hero for sure in this one. Okay, guys, mouth breather, which is my worst character. I have to go with Dr. Hatch. I think that's his name. He was just like one of those guys where like he came off really well, really funny, or like really like, oh, I'm sorry, but there's a process, everything. And then for him to just be like, okay, like, you girls, you convinced me. Like I was like, that was just, it's more of like the writing of the direction. And it was like, again, convenience to like move the plot forward so they could talk to Victor. But I just wish that like he wasn't so easily duped, or he's like, okay, you got 10 minutes or whatever. And then he just leaves for like a half hour. And then he's like on the phone to the police and he's like, oh, actually, I just talked to Mr. Brantley. And he's like, you guys can talk to the police. And I was like, all right, that's a little too on the nose. But his character, he reminded me a little bit of Ben Kingsley, actually a lot of Ben Kingsley from Shutter Island, but just like a poor man's Ben Kingsley, like not as well acted. And so it's no disrespect, as these mouth breathers are the worst characters. It's never disrespect to the actor or actress. It's just that like he is in an episode that was so strong and so powerful and had so many amazing performances. He's kind of the odd man out where he gets the default worst character, just because I wish would have liked a little more pushback from him initially instead of just letting them in, these two girls, into like the high maximum security. And then when they were like, hey, can we talk to him alone, he's like, okay, you know what I mean? And I'm like, dude, that would never happen. So again, little convenience thing there, but I just thought he was the worst, quote unquote worst character for this episode. Okay, guys, if you haven't figured this out by now, for the score, this is a 10 out of 10. This is a 15 out of 10. I mean, this is one of the best episodes, probably the best episode of Stranger Things that they've released. It was just that heavy, heavy emotional burden, and the action was amazing. The visual effects looked incredible, dude. When Max was in there with Vecna, I was like, oh my God. And they showed two people, and I couldn't tell if that was Fred and Chrissy. I think they were on there, and I was like, are they still alive like Barb was when they went into the Upside Down, and Barb was still there, just had and like Will. We had all the slugs. Oh, guys, and this episode too, I think, was when Mike and Will finally made up, and they had that nice scene on the bed. See, there's so many great scenes. I forgot about that. And then he's like, "Yeah, we can be friends." He's like, "Best friends." And I'm like, "Oh, it feels nice that like Mike and Will are finally like back together." And Will, good for Will, because he's that kid's had it rough. I really love the acting in that, and that's a really nice scene. I just wish they were a little more involved, but I think we're gonna obviously have everyone team up, and then it'll be great when the whole team's back together. But guys, this episode, man, I mean, like I said, visually it was incredible, but the emotional storytelling, the emotional weight on everything was so just breathtaking. It really was. I was so impressed, and I felt every single minute of this episode, and it made me feel a whole range of emotions. And it wasn't necessarily one of the funnier episodes, although Robin did say like, this is pinching my boobs and I can't run and stuff. So, but it was mostly like a heavy, like real, like this feels like Max's last episode, and I honestly thought they were gonna kill her off at the end. And when she goes up there, they were like, oh my God, and they're looking up, and she goes up, and especially because we've seen two other characters, as soon as they go up there, they've died. And then we saw the wife in Victor's flashback die the same way. So we've now seen three characters go when they go up in that trance, like it's over, like the closer comes in, the game's over, you know what I mean? They're gonna get the music. But then I was like, man, it would be crazy if they got the music and it still wasn't enough, and Max like gets free. And then I could have sworn they were gonna cut, there's a black cut there, and I was like, oh, they're just gonna roll credits and we don't know if Max got out. Then she's like, oh, I'm out. And but like even when she gets out and then Lucas is holding her, and everyone's super emotional, like, oh man, dude, it was just great. I can't say enough great things. And this like is upper echelon, like one of the best episodes of TV I've ever seen. And it really like got me back. So, but not that I was necessarily on the fence or anything, but you guys have seen my other reviews. Hopefully especially the last episode, I was like, this is all right, but I love the characters in the world. This one was just like, dude, this is what the show could be. It can be so special when it's hitting on all cylinders. And I'm so just glad that it exists and happy. And yeah, I loved it, and I feel like I'm gushing about it, but it's well deserved. This was an amazing episode of television, and well worth the hour and 20-minute runtime, I'd say. Okay, guys, that's it. Another episode of Talkin' Hawkins, a long one of the best episodes of Stranger Things I've ever seen. So it's probably right top three, maybe even higher. It might be the best one they've ever made. I'm not really sure. I'd have to think back, but it was just so good, and that was with like minimal L in it, you know. So just imagine like when the whole cast is in there. But I just love the different beats. But anyway, guys, appreciate you stopping by. Like, comment, subscribe if you did like the content, and until next time, guys, keep running up that hill.